to LSATs and MCATs. So let me just share my screen. And we can just get started. All righty. So when it comes, oops, I should probably do this as a presentation. There we go. All right. So when we're talking about the process to request accommodations on the MCAT or the LSAT, first and foremost, a lot of times students do assume that they're not able to request accommodations on graduate exams. That's not correct. So anytime you have an accommodation need, you can request those accommodations for any graduate record exam. And when it comes to your qualifiers, your comprehensive exams, not just course exams, it can be something that is required for your program, for your degree. It can be a standardized exam. It can be something related to your employment. So if you have to do a research, if you have to do a placement type of exam or an entrance exam for your job, that is also something you can request accommodations in. So for LSAT MCAT, how do you, for this workshop, we're going to learn how to know if you need to request accommodations. We're going to talk about your eligibility criteria, what current documentation, what the word current refers to for both exams, because it does differ, the application process, and specifically how registering, with the DRC can be beneficial in this process. We work with students, typically registered with our office, who are in need of or who would like to request accommodations on graduate record exams. We are the qualifying professional. You're going to hear me say that term a lot. We are the qualifying professional who can complete that specific portion of the application for you. There's still a section that you would need to complete. And again, it's going to vary according to your diagnosis, the accommodations you're requesting, and which exam you're taking. So to start off, how will you know if you need accommodations? So off the top, any student who is currently registered or is seeking registration with the DRC is eligible for accommodations on either graduate exam. And that can be anything from a learning or cognitive condition to a mental health or medical condition. There's even some eligibility criteria that is not related to a formal diagnosis. For example, the MCAT does allow accommodations for nursing mothers, which is not a accommodated diagnosis, but is more of a life experience that can be accommodated on the MCAT. If you're not registered with DRC, that's fine. You do not have to be registered with the disability office or the DRC in order to receive or request accommodations on the LSAT or MCAT. Very important. However, it will help you tremendously if you are registered, because we can work with you and we can be that qualified professional who can complete that specific section on the application. And trust me, these applications are very, very extensive, especially the MCAT accommodation process. We're going to get into that a little bit later. You have to meet the eligibility criteria when it comes to your diagnosis. There may be some additional academic or evaluation requirements or documentation that is required. Again, it's going to vary by each accommodation request and assessment. And you'll also need to adhere to the deadlines. That is another important part. Because the process for both is not instantaneous, it's going to vary. MCAT is much longer. MCAT is about a 60-day review process. LSAT is 14 business days. However, you don't want to wait until, let's say you schedule to take the exam in May. It's already too late to request that. So you want to plan it with significant time, at least 3 to 5, even more months in advance of your exam date or when you would like to take the exam. Whether you need to be scheduled for that exam is going to vary. Again, I'll get into that later. But you want to give yourself ample time to get all the documentation, the applications, everything together. And in case there is a rejection or a denial of your request, you have time to appeal. Both LSAT and MCAT have an appeals process. It can be lengthy depending upon which assessment you're looking at. So instead of me talking about the differences, in general, we can talk about them a little more specifically. On this, I also have the links to the LSAT MCAT accommodation request process, forms, all that information as well. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to share with you a handout that I have that kind of breaks this down a little bit more in a little bit easier way to kind of discuss. So let's see, share. There we go. All right. So with the LSAT, we're going to start with LSAT. I'll just kind of go a little bit back and forth with the different sections. So with the LSAT, there are built, I'll talk about the good parts, the accommodations and what you could be eligible to receive and what things may be already built in to the exam that you, if you needed to request that, you don't need to request it, it's already available to you. Unfortunately, the MCAT does not have built-in accommodations that do not require a request. For the MCAT, you have to request any accommodation that you would need for that exam. With the LSAT, there's already software built in that you can enlarge the text. The exam itself is online. There are some portions that you can request to have a paper or pencil format exam. We'll get to that in a few. But the test itself is online. So if you need larger font, you don't need to request that. That's already available to you, that you can enlarge the font. You do not need to request extra scrap paper. That is also allowed. You do not need to request to be able to bring a beverage. There are some limitations about how much and what you can bring. You can't bring food, but you can bring a beverage, like a juice box or water bottle, things of that nature. And you can bring medication or medical supplies. So students who may need to take diabetes medication or check their blood sugars during the exam, if you have mental health medication or just general medication for hypertension or for any medical conditions, you can bring that and take that during the exam. In terms of accommodations that you must request. So anything that is not, that I didn't just talk about for the LSAT, you have to request it. And there are definite limitations of what accommodations you can receive on both tests. And the majority of the accommodations are testing related. There are some additional accommodations when it comes to taking breaks and things, but that again, that is still regarding your testing environment or the testing time. So regarding the LSAT, these accommodations must be requested and follow the formal request procedure, which we're going to talk about. So additional testing time is available. Breaks, pre-scheduled breaks during the exam is also available. A reader or a scribe. So a reader is someone who would read the text to you. The scribe is pretty much, I like to say, your hands. So you dictate what your answers would be. The scribe would complete or select those answers. Alternate format. So for students who are visually impaired or blind and require Braille, that is also something that can be provided. For the LSAT, as I said, it is an online or computerized exam. You can also request for portions of it to be a paper pen format exam. No Scantron. There are students who may have challenges with dyslexia or completing a Scantron due to some mobility challenges. That is also possible. and to have to be able to read or speak those questions or work it out aloud. I'm definitely one of those people who, when I'm working, if I'm doing anything, I talk it out as opposed to thinking it out. And often in my office, my staff will say, well, oh, you needed me? Because I'm reading an email or I'm typing an email and I'm talking it out loud. That is also available during the LSAT, if that is something that a student would need. In terms of the MCAT, very similar accommodations are available. The MCAT is a lot more rigorous and requires significantly more documentation. But additional testing time, adaptive furniture or technology. So if you need an adjustable chair, so a student who may be of smaller stature, or a student who may have a wheelchair, having that adjustable desk or chair is available. And adaptive technology. So a mouse or mice that work best for that student. There's some other technology that could also be applicable, a screen reader, screen magnification, things of that nature. Breaks, as we discussed, enlarged text and alternate format, Braille specifically, is available upon request and approved request. So that's the good news of the accommodations that you may be able to receive on the LSAT and MCAT. So now we're going to talk about how to request it and what is required in that process. So first and foremost, as I said, any student with a disability, documented disability, is eligible or can apply for accommodations on the LSAT and MCAT. There's a lot of different types of disabilities. I listed some of them, but each process has a specific category in which one of these or the diagnosis would fall. The good news is much of this information is very consistent with the documentation guidelines for the DRC. So if in some of the language that's used on both exams, both exam applications, it's a little confusing. But I will say, if you have, or if you are in the process of registering with the DRC and your documentation was determined valid by the DRC, most likely within the eligibility criteria. So things, cognitive concerns, ADD, ADHD, specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, also neurological conditions such as concussions, traumatic brain injuries or TBIs are also considered eligible diagnostic criteria for accommodations on the LSAT or MCAT. Psychological conditions, didn't list all of them, but psychological conditions, chronic medical conditions like seizure-related disorders, diabetes, Crohn's disease. A lot of times students won't think that a medical condition would result in a need for additional time, but it does. If you think of a student with a gastrointestinal condition like Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome, you may need those breaks. The stress of the exam can send your blood sugars, can trigger a seizure. There's a lot of different effects of this type of an exam can have on a student with a medical condition, which would warrant and justify and support an accommodation during that exam. Sensory related conditions, blind and low vision, deaf, hard of hearing, mobility challenges. There could be a sensitivity to light based on a traumatic brain injury or concussion that could also result in some other accommodations not listed in this handout. So for example, with concussions and seizures, sensitivity to light is very common. Excessive exposure to computers and that focus of a computer is also part of some of the challenges with a seizure or a sensory related challenge, which can result in additional time, breaks, variety of types of accommodations. other neurodiverse conditions like autism and autism spectrum, physical and mobility challenges. And as I said, for the MCAT, they also will consider temporary conditions, such as you broke your finger, you broke your leg, and nursing mothers are also eligible for accommodations. Any questions so far? I want to pause before we get into the actual process.
So they don't already provide you with breaks for the MCAT? You have to ask for that?
Yes.
Okay.
That is part of the accommodation. Now, if there is a break during the section, so if there's a break in between the sections, that's separate. The accommodation of breaks during an exam are breaks that you can take, not predetermined breaks that are built into the exam itself. So for example, the last exam I remember taking is a SAT. That's how long it's been since I've taken exams. But if you recall, in those type of exams, you may have a break after you complete the writing portion. They may give you a break or a specific amount of time. And if you finish before that time, you just kind of put your pencil down, relax, collect your thoughts. When it comes to the MCAT and LSAT, you can take a break and have it built in and approved as an accommodation. So it could be a break for a variety of reasons based on your documentation. It pauses your exam time so that the clock, of course, you can't pause time, but it pauses your actual testing time so that you can take that break. It is a predetermined amount of time. So the testing council or board, when you're confirming and scheduling your exam, or however it varies, they will let you know that predetermined amount of time that you will have for that break. Usually it's not more than 10 minutes. It's usually like a 5-10 minute break. The accommodation portion of it.
And beverages are allowed, you said, or is it just for the LSAT?
Beverages with the LSAT are allowed. The MCAT is much more specific. They may allow you a small bottle of water, but that is typically something that needs to be approved.
And I'll provide it. Oh, sorry, Isabel. I'll provide in the chat a link to what the standard MCAT test day looks like, which includes breaks and what's allowed at certain parts of the test. That's like the standard testing day. So I'll include that in the chat just so you can have an idea of what would be kind of standard, and then what would be outside of that is exactly what Megan is talking about, like the additional accommodations.
I have a question again about the anxiety piece. So if someone's doing a practice LSAT and each section is 35 minutes and they find themselves not even getting through maybe half of those questions within 35 minutes because of feeling anxiety, would that be a good indicator that they should probably have an appointment with the DRC?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And for the, thank you for requesting more time. Is it typically like time and a half or double time, triple time? Like how much time is usually requested?
Double time is usually the maximum that is allowed. Typically, it's usually time and a half. Everything is documentation supported. So it's not that you can't get double time. That does happen. But typically, the more common accommodation that is approved is time and a half. But double time can also be approved. It just requires significant documentation.
Thank
and
you.
It's typically, especially in the case of the MCAT, anytime that I've ever seen a student approved for double time, there is extensive neurological challenges. So it's usually something related to concussions, traumatic brain injuries, a significant cognitive deficit. Typically, not saying that it will not be approved for other conditions, but that is what I have seen in my 15 years of doing this. I have not seen double time approved, even for students who receive double time regarding learning disabilities or other non-brain injury related conditions. I've seen them deny double time, but approve time and a half. So it's going to vary, but typically it is time and a half and double time. Untimed exams I've never seen that approved, ever. That's typically not an accommodation that is approved in higher ed in general. So a graduate exam with an untimed a standardized graduate entrance exam, also very, very unlikely that it will be an untimed exam. If it was already timed. If it wasn't untimed, then of course it'll continue that. But if it isn't, if it is a timed exam, that I've never seen it modified to be an untimed exam. Link in the chat. Nope, not for me. Okay, so now we're going to get into the process of how to request the accommodations, and it will differ significantly between the LSAT and the MCAT. So I'm actually going to start with the MCAT, which is this second column, because that is an extensive process. And I will say, for all students who are applying for accommodation on the MCAT, you want to give yourself ample time. I'm talking several months. At least 90 days. 90 days would be 3 months, at least 3 months before the date that you would like to take the exam, to get your application, get all your documentation. Another important thing is take your time and really, really read through the application, which again is why it's going to be beneficial to work with the DRC. We've done this many, many times. It is quite extensive. It requires a lot of documentation regarding the MCAT. There's lots of information on their website to help you with that, but it's still a lot of information to digest. We can absolutely help you with that. The last thing I want to say, just before we get into that, the rejection rate for MCAT accommodations is extremely high. Many students, and I'll even say every student I've ever worked with who has requested accommodations on the MCAT was denied on their first attempt for a variety of reasons. Their second attempt usually proves successful. And that's because of the amount of documentation, their current deadlines, and the process within itself. It is extensive. So if you are rejected on your first request, do not get discouraged. It's not you, it's them. But reach out to the DRC. If you didn't work with us, reach out to us. If you did work with us, reach out to us again, and we can work with you to see where that issue lies, and we can work with you to address it. So with that being said, first step, you have to, when it comes to the MCAT, you have to complete an online application. Your request is made online. Do not schedule your MCAT exam until you are approved for your accommodations. Big difference between the MCAT and the LSAT. The MCAT, you cannot register for your exam until you're approved. The LSAT, you have to register for your exam before you request your accommodations. Big, big, big difference. For the MCAT, you want to make sure you're looking at those application deadlines. The review of the application takes up to 60 days, but your application has to be in the system You want to get it in the system. There's a certain amount of days before your date that you need to get that in the system. Because if you're approved, it takes about 15 days before you have to then schedule the exam, at least 15 days. It's a whole process. Trust me, it's a lot. It's a lot. But there's 15 days after you're approved that you can go in and schedule and all of that. So you just want to make sure that you're looking and you're adhering to those deadlines, because that is also a main reason why requests are denied for the MCAT. It's also going to vary what documentation, what your actual requirement and what needs to accompany that application is going to vary based on your diagnosis. There are a variety of what current documentation will mean. It can be anywhere from 6 months to 3 years prior to that in terms of prior to that exam date to be current. It's going to vary. Medical and mental health related is typically that six months deadline. So it has to be even more current than DRC documentation. It has to be very, very recent. 3 years is typically for your learning, your non-medical mental health. And in some cases, if there's a consistency with accommodations through undergrad, there is some flexibility there. Without giving you too much information, because it's going to vary by diagnosis, just reach out to DRC. I would say that a lot, reach out to DRC, because it does vary. You may also need to provide additional information in terms of your academic records, medical documentation, and evaluations may also need to be submitted along with that application. As I said, the review for MCAT takes up to 60 days. You can request an extension and you can appeal a decision if your application or request is denied. In terms of the LSAT, it's a little more straightforward. The LSAT, again, you also have to request your accommodations online. There are deadlines as well, but you have to register for the LSAT before the LSAT exam, before you request your accommodations. There are specific forms that need to be completed, and those forms, again, depending on your diagnosis and the accommodation you're requesting, you may or may not need to complete all of those forms or additional documentation. It's going to vary. Commonly, however, with testing accommodations, so anything testing related, additional testing time, breaks, enlarged is already there, but formatting, so if you wanted or if you needed that paper versus the computerized portion, if you needed a reader or a scribe, no Scantron, things of that nature, you must complete the student or the candidate request form, and there's a companion qualified professional form that also needs to be completed. The student form is going to ask you things like what accommodation you're requesting, your diagnosis, and a brief statement that explains the evaluation or your information regarding the impact of that diagnosis in your testing or in your academic environment. The qualified professional form is what the DRC completes, or the evaluator. So if you were recently evaluated, you can have the person who administered your evaluation complete that form. It's going to have they need their credentials, there's a lot of information on there. Diagnosis, the challenges, lots of information for that qualified professional. There is also a way, depending on the accommodations you're requesting and the diagnosis. You may not need to complete all of that. There may be a personal statement in which you're analyzing that impact of how that diagnosis, how the challenges with that diagnosis impact and support your need for testing accommodations. And any supporting documentation. Things like IEPs, 504 plans, letters from your medical or mental health provider, testing in terms of medical testing, or if it's a sensory related concern, hearing, vision, they may also require those audiograms, vision tests, things of that nature. It doesn't hurt to provide it as well. You'd rather provide more than not enough. And that's the one thing that was needed. Again, definitely recommend that you work with the DRC to figure out what is valid and what is sufficient in terms of supporting documentation. The LSAT provides a decision within 14 business days, Monday through Friday, and you can also appeal your decision for the LSAT as well. I want to talk briefly about documentation requirements. Again, it's gonna vary. With the MCAT, the most important thing is going to be their definition of current accommodation, current documentation. It will vary by the diagnosis type, whether it's a medical, mental health, sensory, learning. As I said, medical, mental health, typically 6 months is considered current documentation. Cognitive, learning, sensory, 3 years, or showing a consistency of accommodations throughout undergrad can also be possible. It's gonna vary. With LSATs, current documentation is considered 5 years or less when it relates to a cognitive. Other types of concerns are considered current once the client or the candidate, the student candidate, reaches age 13. So any evaluation, any letters that were completed past your 13th birthday will be considered current, especially if it is supported with DRC accommodations. So if you have received accommodations for at least one semester, even if you were registered since freshman year, but you didn't request until sophomore, or you didn't request since freshman year, if you have one semester of accommodations with the DRC, that can also support those accommodation requests for the LSAT. You may also need to provide other standardized test scores. So if you did take the LSAT, if you did take I said LSAT, yeah, LSAT. If you did take the pre-LSAT, you can also provide that. There will be some additional statements or summaries, written expression that you will need to provide supporting your request for accommodations for the LSAT itself, but that is also possible. So a previous experience or challenges with standardized testing can also apply here. So if you did take the SAT and you received accommodations from College Board, or the ACT or GRE from College Board, you can request the accommodations based on that previous testing accommodation experience. So really quickly, key points. In terms of the LSAT, you have to register for the exam first, complete that online request. There are accommodations that are built in. They are not regarding additional testing time, but they are things like scrap paper, enlarged text, beverages, and medical testing if you need to do any testing during your exam. Your accommodations or requestable accommodations will vary based on the accommodation, based on the documentation, and based on specifically that diagnosis. However, it will be limited to testing. So additional time, breaks, things of that nature. There's going to be different forms that are going to be required, again, based on the type of accommodation request and your diagnosis. Most importantly, I cannot stress enough, it's going to be really, really helpful if you register with the DRC. Even if you're just registering for the sole purpose of requesting accommodations for these exams, it will take a lot of the stress of figuring out some of this information and what documentation is required for either exam. So I'm going to stop my share. I talk a whole lot, so I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing me talk and looking at my handouts. I really would love any questions from any of our students or our staff that may have seen some common concerns or questions from students. And then I'll share DRC information.
If I may just jump in, because I feel like some of these accommodations could be a game changer for students, and they don't know unless they ask. Do you happen to have an example you could share with us of a student who was able to like turn their test performance around?
Absolutely. So this is my second university that I've actually worked in disability services. Before Montclair State, I was at another university in the state. And I had a student who I'd known since her freshman year. She was graduating in the spring semester. And about summer, the previous summer, she reached out to me asking if I could help her with her MCAT application. So I said, of course, no problem. So this was actually my first MCAT application that I ever worked on. So that's why it sticks out in my head. So previously, I was very, very accustomed to doing applications for GREs, GMATs, those more common graduate record exams. So I said, oh, yay, MCAT. So she scheduled an appointment. She came in and she had a packet. I'm like, what is the packet for? Because the GRE, it's not as extensive. So when she showed me the pages, I said, oh, wait a minute. This is the application for the MCAT. She's like, yeah, that's why I needed your help. So I said, okay, fabulous. Let's do this. So we spent that hour going through her statement. So there's sections where the student has to complete explain some things, where they have to answer some open-ended questions. And she was struggling with how much or how little to provide. Am I providing enough? How do I word this? How do I say this without sounding like I can't do this? So there's several questions like that. And many of the questions ask very similar things. So it may seem like you're repeating yourself. There's also very specific instructions not to repeat what is in your evaluation. So if your evaluator talks about your struggles with memory, you don't want to say, I struggle with memory, You want to kind of develop that a lot more, and truly equate that to what you'll be doing on the exam and in the profession. So a lot of the questions are about critical thinking, connecting what the exam is asking, what the profession is asking, and what your functional limitations, their word, not mine, what your functional limitations are related to why you need an accommodation. That's a lot to process. Just saying it alone is a lot to process. So my student, we'll call her Mary, had a complete breakdown in my office. Complete, total bawling, crying, that hysterical, that crying where you can't catch your breath. That's how she was crying in my office. And this was after we had been working on the application for a little under an hour, so about maybe 45, 50 minutes. She'd reached her breaking point and was done. So we spent the rest of the time just talking, kind of setting all that aside. So she made an appointment later to come back and finish it. She did not come back. I saw her frequently for different not related to the MCAT, but different accommodations. And I didn't want to bring it up because it was clear that it was triggering some things for her. So I let a couple appointments go by, and then we started talking about it. And she just said that, you know, what's the point? I'm just going to try it. It's just way too much. The exam can't be as bad. I have a straight A average, which she did. I have a straight A average. I'm a biomedical major, plus so in her mind, I got this. I'm super smart. I can do this. I won't need my accommodations. So we talked about it. She was firm. Okay, no problem. She took her first MCAT. She did not do well at all. And the day after, she came in and again, bawling, crying. So we talked about it, trying to keep hope that it maybe wasn't as bad. There's always, you can retake it. Don't worry about it. So let's start working on those accommodations now. So we used that opportunity to, instead of doing those questions, to look at the documentation. That was less triggering for her. And it was already enough that we had to do when it came to her documentation, getting that current. So we went through the process. She had to be reevaluated, a lot of extra steps. That was summer. Say towards Thanksgiving break, somewhere near or after Thanksgiving break, we had the documentation we needed. It took a good 6-7 months because she needed to be reevaluated, that whole 3 year, the whole thing. So in that process, she was able to answer a question every so often. And then she would come back to me, this is what I want to say for this question. What do you think? And we would edit it. We would talk about it. What do you feel about? Okay, is that too much? Yeah, maybe we don't say that. Maybe we say this instead. So it was about a year, at least 9 months to a year after her first MCAT, which she did very poorly at. We did the application, we did the documentation, we did everything, submitted it. She was denied. They denied her accommodation. So she's like, I'm not taking this MCAT again. I can't. So I said, okay, let's see what the conditions are. Why were you denied? It was a very, very minute thing, but that's how picky they are. So we corrected that. We had to do an entirely new, she went through the appeal, did everything. We had the support why we're appealing it. We did that, all that. She finally got approved. And it was not too long before she had to take the MCAT, maybe a month, maybe. So she had the stress of getting it in on time. She got it in, she got approved, and she was stressed. And she's like, well, what if I don't, what? So she got approved, she takes the MCAT. She was scheduled to she graduated that spring. She was still about May. April, May, she was still waiting for her scores from the MCAT. She had applied to medical school. She had planned on taking a gap year, but she was going to finish her biomedical degree. So she was graduating with her biology degree, still had a couple courses to finish for her BME degree. So she gets it, when she finally she graduates with her biology degree in May. That same week, she got her scores back. She came running in my office, bawling again. I'm like, oh Lord, we can't do this again. And she's like, I got a great grade. I got a great score. She's just bawling. We keep in contact. This was 4 years ago. We keep in contact now. She's finished med school. She is doing amazingly well. She's in DC, and she to this day is like, I don't know how I did it, but thank you. But it's absolutely possible. Which is exactly why I say for MCATs, you're probably going to be rejected the first time you do it. It is that strict, that strenuous, and that stressful of a process. But stay diligent, stay at it. You can be approved. And that approval makes such a difference. Like I said, the student she was like a 4.1. She had straight A's and A pluses and everything. Like I said, she was a biology major and a biomedical engineering major. She was more than able to pass it. But because she did not have that additional testing time, and she received time and a half, that time and a half, that additional hour, that additional 45 minutes, whatever that equates to, makes such a difference. It allows you to go back, look at your exam, to take your time and think about those questions. A lot of times on both exams, it's not, yes, it is subject based. So it is going to test that biology, that chemistry, that math, that anatomy, those legal precedences. But it's also logic. You have to think through the questions to figure out which is the best option, to figure out how to really answer the question and what the question is asking you. It's more logic than subject-based. Trust me, there's lots of subject stuff on there. But if you think your way through it, the subject stuff will come. So that extra time gives you the time to process that question. If you need to speak it aloud, if you need to say, okay, so I remember they're talking about the bones and then that bone, and then if you need to process it, okay, so they talked about this case. I remember the Supreme Court case, and there was it set the precedent for the what was the legal statute? If you can process through that and think through that, that's what really is going to show how is really going to improve your score. And in order to do that, you need the extra time.
That hit the nail on the head, Megan. That was a great illustration of a real struggle and ultimate victory. And then that's what accommodations are for. They're to help you be victorious on this test, because we know it's hard, it's uncomfortable, and it's an opportunity to apply for accommodations and register with the DRC. So I'm so glad MSU has you and the center, because it's so valuable. So anyone else have questions? I know our time is just about past, but no.
I will say lastly, really quickly, students often do ask about, well, what if I don't have current evaluations? For the MCAT, there are some low-cost evaluation options included on their website. We also have that here at Montclair. So you don't have to be registered with the DRC. It is a bit of an expedited process if you are and you go through us, but you can be reevaluated or evaluated at clinical services, specifically the Psychoeducational Services Clinic, or PSC. You can complete an application online on their website, and you will be contacted to schedule an appointment to begin testing. There's no way to prepare for the test, so it's nothing that you have to cram for. It is a cognitive intelligence test to determine your challenges regarding processes like processing speed, memory, written expression, language, reading comprehension, all those things you got to do on both of those exams. So when you test with the PSC, it is significantly lower cost than what these assessments cost off campus. If you go off campus, you will pay anywhere from $800 to $8,000 for an evaluation, and insurance does not cover it. So I don't know about you, but I don't have $3,000 to pay for an evaluation. If you go through the PSC, it is $100 flat rate. There are other locations within the state that also offer low-cost evaluations. However, they're limited and they all have a wait list, anywhere from a month to 6 months. So when you do see on the MCAT website, I would even say if you're an LSAT student, you can look on their website too for those low-cost evals to see what is available within this area, or if you're, from a different state, what's available closer to home to be evaluated. But you will need a current evaluation.
Excellent. And Megan, just out of curiosity, how long does that test take? How long?
It's going to depend on what assessment is selected by the evaluator and how many assessments. So let's say, I won't get too boring with the actual assessments, but let's say you're the assessor, there's typically 2 to 3 that are pretty much the standards. The Woodcock-Johnson, the WAIS, W-A-I-S, and the Wechsler, or WIPS, W-P-S. Those are the 3 standards that an evaluator will typically administer. They're each, depending upon, it's usually an initial appointment to get a background of the student, what their challenges are, their history with accommodations, or their history with academic challenges, to determine which one would be the most applicable. After that, again, depending on the evaluator, they will select which subtest or how many subtests they will need to test that student in. So each subtest can take anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. They're not long. They're not long at all. It just depends on which test, how many subtests are being administered. So you can complete them in about a week, 2 weeks, depending on how that evaluator schedules. They may say, let's do one Monday, we'll do another Tuesday, we'll take a break, we'll come back next week, as to not create brain fatigue, because that will also skew the scores. So there's some variance, but all in all, what takes the most time is the actual report. So once they've tested, once the student has completed the testing, the evaluator has to then write up a report, has to score each assessment, write up the report, and then their recommendations. That's what takes the longest time. You can complete them anywhere from a month, about a month, maybe 2, depends. But it's not too long. It just, again, with scheduling and how many assessments, and you may take them, they may give you the Wechsler, something may come out inconclusive, you may be a little bit on the borderline, maybe there's some signs of dyslexia, maybe there's some signs of ADHD and some other things, and they want to give you the WAIS or the Woodcock-Johnson, just to kind of clarify what exactly is going on. So that may take another week or 2, and then the report. So it's going to vary.
Okay. Excellent. I've learned a lot, and I feel more confident talking about this with students. So thank you so much, Megan.
Absolutely,
for
glad
your
to help.
presentation. Yep.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to get that handout to you as well, so you each can have that for your students. If they're concerned or any questions they have, definitely we're here to help. Feel free to refer them to the DRC.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you so much, Megan. This was really wonderful. Thank you.
I'm glad to help. Glad to help.
Bye.
Have a great semester, everyone. Take care. Thanks for having me.